At the hearing.
And there she is, recording in progress.
Okay.
Are you sure you're not having side business?
I do. Flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Works much better.
It's very strong.
Okay, we'll open it up for anyone there from the public, Janine.
Anybody here from the public who has anything to discuss that is not on the agenda tonight? Anybody on Zoom?
No, there is no one.
Okay, all right. There's no one, Carol.
Okay, so we'll close it to the public. We have minutes that need to be approved from June 10th. So we need a motion to approve.
Tim Walter, I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Tim,
Second.
second by Rich.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone abstain?
I wasn't there.
One abstention by Larry, the mayor. Okay. All right.
Okay, so I think we can go right to our public hearing. And we're hearing Old Farm Orchard. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm having trouble hearing, but I'll do the best I can.
Okay. If everybody could just speak up, that would be absolutely fantastic. And let me know also what documents I need to be sharing. When we, so I assume we're starting with the engineer.
Let me get on back on internet.
Okay, all right. Janine, I think Carol is in the waiting room.
Great.
Okay.
No,
Is she, are you called something else, Carol? Are you, does nobody know who's leaving?
Well,
Okay, she's not seeing you.
just don't, I gave you anything because I had trouble before and, you know, on the phone, I could get on.
And you're using the email that was sent that said sorry, right? If you can get to your email, go to the email with that, with the meeting is called sorry about this. If you go to that, everything.
here you go.
We got you. Okay, good.
She got me?
Yep, there you are. All right, Carol.
Yay.
All right.
Okay.
Now you said-
Carol's on mute.
Unmute.
There you
We have a terrible storm going on here. I mean, it's just awful. It's pitch black and just pouring. So, okay. All right, we're good.
Good evening. David Cronin from Dr. Mueller on behalf of the applicant. It's great to see everyone in person. It's nice to see smiling faces instead of disembodied heads from everyone. We're here this evening. I'm here this evening on behalf of Old Farm Orchards LLC, which is more commonly known as Brookville Cider. And we're here tonight to talk about a small adjustment to their operations. As many of you know, Burnt Mills has rapidly become a very beloved part of the community and a wonderful community gathering spot. And that's why we're here tonight before the board, to take some of the experience that we've gleaned in the last year and a half, in particular the ways in which the COVID pandemic has influenced consumer preferences, and to try to make some adjustments to make the operation more efficient, to reduce some of the impacts that we've seen from COVID, some that we think will continue, and some that may subside.
Sorry, Greg. Yeah, I just had that it was hard to hear you. So
Okay, I'll try to speak a little louder. Sorry. What we are not looking to do is to increase the intensity of the use, to serve more people. And we're not looking to change any of the prior conditions. So we're here tonight asking this board's approval for a variance for impervious coverage, a very minor one, 6.1% has already been approved, and we're looking to increase that to 6.5%, 6.56%, so less than 0.5%. Looking to amend the site plan, add additional patio seating, now for service area and covered area for music. We're looking for a waiver from the Somerset County Planning Board. that, I would like to call the clock to stand. We want to sit or stand or visible.
He's most visible, I think, at where next to you or at the microphone, and also we need him to speak into that mic, I believe.
But then anybody who's online isn't gonna see anything he has.
We're gonna share that, right?
Okay, now that's.
Is it all the same? There's no,
Yes.
okay, perfect.
It's just mounted on phone port, that's all.
This is the
Right,
site.
we don't see it, we don't see anything at all from the screen.
Yeah,
So Jeff is going to try to put up.
So we're sharing the site work right now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let me do that.
Hold on one second, David.
You have share screen on?
But
yes.
Yeah, we'll put this to the board. We'll do- what do we think?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It'll be up on the big
Okay,
screen
on the
as well.
Okay, great.
right, and we have copies.
And Paul's
Paul.
also asking if you just stand close to the mic as possible.
We'll stand very close.
Okay, so guys, just let me know where I need to be scrolling to here.
Paul, please, you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spell your last name, and give us at least a business address.
Paul Fox with Echo Associates in Far Hills.
Thank you, Paul. We'll just confirm for the record that the board recognizes and accepts the qualifications of Paul Fox as a professional engineer. Please go ahead, gentlemen.
Wonderful, thank you. Mr. Fox, would you just, we have the site plan up here, would you just walk us through the proposed improvements, please?
Sure. First, we're proposing to expand the existing patio area to the side of the tasting room by approximately 350 square feet to essentially fill in the corner between the tasting room and the main production facility. So that is the first item we're requesting. The second is to construct a pergola frame over that patio where we could hang decorative lights from and sort of bring the space down a little bit. Fourth, we're requesting approval to construct a covered shelter off to the rear and side of the building. And then fifth, we're asking for approval to build a sidewalk that would take customers directly from the parking area to the rear patio rather than having to have them walk through the tasting room. And then finally, we're asking approval for a generator to be placed behind the main building that would support the existing production when the power went out.
And, you know, the sum total of those improvements, what would the impervious coverage be for work improvements?
So the total requested impervious coverage for the project is 6.56. The board previously approved a variance of 6.22%, required is 5% for this zone.
I want to, sorry, I'm trying to get a little bit, reading it very, very friendly. One of those two specific comments that were in the professional review. Can you address for me the concerns about wastewater management and septic management? How would you propose to handle sort of the septic system?
Sure. Mr. Farrar brought up the comment that a plan for peak periods should be submitted to the health department for approval, and we would agree to work with the county health department to address those concerns as well as their concerns.
And could you give us an example of how you might suggest managing these peak periods?
Well, I think there's a variety of ways. I wouldn't want to kind of delve into it right now. I think meeting with the county health department and understanding what their concerns. But I think there's a couple of ways, either addressing it if there's a lot of customers for a special event, having portable toilets, or arranging for a pump out before and after from the septic tank. There's a couple different ways, and also monitoring how much water usage to make sure that the existing water usage does not exceed what the design limits for the septic system was. But I think we would have to meet with the county health department staff and specifically identify what we would agree to do that and address that.
And the second comment I would like to address is the traffic management plan, the idea that would be submitted for approval.
Sure. Mr. Ferraro's fifth comment with respect to traffic management, specifically that parking along Route 206 is hazardous, which we agree, as well as entering and exiting traffic during peak hours is problematic, particularly if there's a special event. One of the things we also note is that during peak periods where you have a lot of traffic going into Chester, even on the weekend, simply having a gap on the highway to pull in and out of a driveway, whether it be the cidery driveway or even the church across the street, can be quite difficult. So that's the kind of things we would address in the traffic management plan for submittal to Mr. Ferraro's office as well as the police.
And in your professional opinion, do you believe that the benefits of this proposal outweigh the negative impacts?
Yes, I do. This is a very de minimis increase in the proposed lot coverage. It will significantly improve the efficiency of the site and will overall benefit.
And also in your professional opinion, does the proposed, approve of this proposal impair the zoning plan?
No, it will not.
And anything else like that to test us?
Anyone else on the board have questions for Paul?
Yeah, where would this additional parking be on this map? Can we see that?
Sure. There is additional parking located in turf areas alongside the driveway, as well as along, you can't see it on this map, but where there's a grove of apple trees being started. So for special events, that provides for overflow parking.
I still don't understand where that is.
So each side of the main driveway going up to the existing parking lot is suitable for parking on an occasional basis on turf, similar to what you would have for farm parking.
So how do they typically handle that nose-in parking on either side of the drive?
That's right.
So just 20 feet or so right off that?
That's right, very simple. And one of the things that I've discussed with Mr. Coates is that for special events, having parking attendants to make sure people are parking safely and efficiently and to keep things in an organized fashion for those kind of special times.
3, 4, 5.
Does the turf need to be managed in any particular way to keep that from becoming rutted and eroded and washing away and, you know?
Certainly, you can't use turf as a parking surface on a routine daily basis. It's really best for an occasional basis. For instance, I see you're wearing a Penn State shirt. My son went to Penn State, and when you go out to the games, all the parking for the most part is on turf, and they're parking there pretty much every week. And you can see it really doesn't wear out things too much. I think the challenge on this site is we were trying to get the turf going, I think as observed by Mr. Banish, right about at the time when the weather was turning, and in some areas, the turf didn't really have a chance to get well established. So that's one of the things we're going to be focusing on this fall when it's the growing season.
Paul, the concrete waffle kind of things, that's considered coverage, so that's not an alternative here?
It would be considered lot coverage. I would consider it that way. And it's not realistic to think that that would have any real grass growing through it. It would look more like bare earth and worn out grass, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some of that actually over at the pizza store right next to the first aid squad, if you want to take a look at that. And really, it just, for some reason, I don't know if it's a pH issue with the concrete, it never gets established well. What we would typically recommend in that kind of a situation is a reinforcing grid called invisible pavement, which is this brass that grows through the grid. So it's a natural surface, but the grid allows for additional weight bearing where it's actually safe for even driving fire trucks on.
Oh, okay.
So if it would be needed, that's what we'd probably look at.
That's an interesting, and that's not considered coverage, Paul, that kind of thing?
It probably wouldn't be considered coverage because it has good permeability. It would meet the definition of the DEP standard for pervious surface because it's more than 60% voids. There are drawbacks to that as well. It can get worn out. You certainly couldn't do any snow removal on it because it peels it right up. I don't think snow removal would be an issue here, but it is something that's, in my opinion, better used for an emergency access for fire trucks running around a building than a parking area. I think that the biggest issue here is the grass never really got a good chance to be established, and perhaps what can be done is take this in phases where areas of the grass are basically cordoned off until they become good solid turf, and then you move to the next and you work your way down up and down the driveway to get some good grass established without parking in it for a while.
We did alternate sides or something like that.
Yeah, alternate sides, alternate sections. I don't think you want to take 50% of it out, but if you took out, 20, 25% of the time, and then get that to come in good and strong, and then you move to the next area.
So is the principal here to talk about the uses? I won't ask you, Mr. Fox, about the uses. Okay, super.
Carol, I have something.
Yes, sure. Go ahead, Lou.
Okay, so I think the addition of Old Farm Orchards to Bedminster has been a great thing, but I don't want to be a party pooper here. We have what appears to be a very busy and growing business entity on a R10 zone property. And as we look forward to this, improvement, it's sort of like, to me, if you build it, more people will come, and that's a great thing. But I think the board all needs to think very carefully about the traffic, because I've been stuck in that traffic. It's hazardous, absolutely hazardous on a fall afternoon, and the parking and the total number of people on the property. I just think that we really need to kind of really think this through very carefully, and at the same time allow the proprietor to be able to expand his business in a controlled growth way. So it's not a question for Paul, but I'm not convinced that Paul Fox gave us the information we really need for a future plan of, if more people come, how many people on the property, how many guests, how many cars, any of those. We don't have any of that information.
I think that's all good points, Lou. Paul Ferreira, are you satisfied with this parking? And is this adequate for the square footage that's there and the amount of people that show up?
Well, the parking that's improved certainly is not enough. They, during the peak periods, there are cars parked up and down the entire length of the driveway. And I've also seen vehicles parked out on 206, which I think is a separate and different problem that really needs to be avoided. The parking that's there is enough for a use that doesn't get the kind of traffic that this facility does. On the other hand, I don't know if you necessarily want to have improved parking for what this is on the peak days. It's a difficult challenge. It's a difficult balance as to what you can do. I think there were a number of forces at work here, and one of the big ones was this was a place where you could go during COVID. So while it was a place people enjoyed, it was one of the few places you could go over the last 15 months. And that really increased its popularity and the number of people that were out there.
I think Mr. Coates' assessment of the rest of the board's concern as well.
Well, do you have any suggestions, Paul, as to how we might, improve the parking? I understand we don't want more impervious coverage, but just building up the grass, is that really the answer?
Carol, can I wait here real quick?
Yes, of course, Frank.
Thanks. I really do think that we're on to a big issue here between the stacking out and parking on the highway and the other traffic issues. Getting people efficiently onto the site and parked, I think, is really important. If we can do it in a way where we don't really extend the coverage dramatically, and I think some of these geogrids that are not the cinder block type actually could be very effective. What we really want here is a significant overflow parking area on the grass where people can quickly figure out they can get out of the way of everybody else and other people out on the highway can get onto the site and off the site. And I think it's obvious where that parking area already is and probably wants to be. But I also think there's been such a sort of haphazard parking arrangement up and down the driveway and around the site that we're never going to grow grass if we don't get a little bit more organized about it.
And one way to do that, and Frank just hit on it relative to the haphazard parking, is people park where they think they're supposed to park. And if you don't have any delineation of parking, people leave, extra space between cars and that sort of thing. So one aspect of this that may help organize the parking without creating too much is putting in concrete wheel stops. That gives people a visual of what they're supposed to park in front of, and people won't take up a space and a half or 2 spaces when they come in, and that will increase the number of people who actually be able to get in along the driveway.
That could be done with railroad ties, different ways, yeah.
I want to ask a question to Paul and or Tom or Frank, and call me crazy, but this is a very unique situation. A business entity on an R10 zone like this, is it possible for future to rezone this lot? To just rezone it completely and have it make it its own entity, such as we might have done for in Pluckerman?
Well, I don't think so, Lou, because you don't want to spot zone, but remember the context of this. This was a facility to support agriculture. That's when it came in. It's like a farm stand. That's a permitted use in the R10 zone.
Okay.
I think if we could, I think Lou makes a great point. If this was a restaurant or a bar, you bring food trucks on site. I've been there a couple times with food trucks. It's quite pleasant to go there, hang out for a couple hours, especially during COVID. It was a very welcome relief from our routines, right? But if there was any other kind of eating or drinking establishment, there would be the fire department would have limits on capacity, all those, things being accommodated indoors. Now that we have, this outdoor accommodation, it seems like, some sort of limits to the amount of parking and the amount of people on site can and should be established. And at some point, ownership's going to have to turn people away, or the police department's going to have to ticket people on 206. But, some sort of limitation to keep cars from, parking nose in from the front door to 206, I could imagine at some point it becomes a little excessive. So I don't know how we would establish those limitations, Frank, but is there some logic we can attach to this?
Has the fire department, have they issued any kind of limitations on attendance here at all? I mean, they've obviously seen the plan.
Carol, they wouldn't.
No.
Because, it's the fire official that deals with capacity issues, and that has to do with
the fire code.
The number of people that are in the building, and people
just
in the building is not the issue.
No, but not on the property.
No, that's not a fire code issue.
But we have a planning issue, so can we attach some limits here?
If I could just weigh in again, I do think that part of the reason that we have a conundrum here is that we're trying to keep the coverage down, but they need more coverage in order to adequately park cars on the site. If we can do it with something that's not paved coverage, either stone or pavement, that's ideal. But I think it takes a lot more of the site to be used for parking than we've thought about in the past. And if we're going to go up and down the driveway, I think other than just the dirt surface that's there now, there needs to be some level of improvement that allows those areas to adequately serve as parallel parking areas.
Can we have the applicant as part of this conversation? John might already have some ideas and some suggestions.
Wait, yes, but let's finish with Paul for now. Any further questions from the board or the public for Paul Fox?
Just two minor clarifications, the proposed covered shelter, what's the purpose of that?
Mr. Coast can speak to that. The basic idea is to provide entertainment for people that are using the patio.
So it's like a band shell or?
Correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned the county department of health, but wouldn't that go through the Bedminster Board of Health for the septic?
I would have to work with Mr. Farrar on that to determine which.
I think the issue on that is if you go to the Township Board of Health and alter the septic system, you're going to be getting into the DEP design criteria for the system, which is going to put it over with the numbers of people that are there, potentially over 2,000 gallons a day, which creates many levels of permits that really become a challenge. I think dealing with the county health department, the management of a use like this that does involve some level of food and beverage service and high peak events may be the best way to do that. I think going to the Board of Health creates some additional complications.
So maybe before.
Hey, Paul, can you?
Go ahead.
I guess I'm confused as to why our own Board of Health wouldn't want to take a look at this and have an input on it.
Our Board of Health can, but they are going to be limited by the standards in NJAC 7:9A. That means they have to look at what the design flow would be for the peak number of people on the site, to provide on-site septic. It requires a treatment works approval from the state to figure out what that design flow would be. Ultimately, if it is more than 2,000 gallons a day, they will need a wastewater management plan amendment, and a gypsies permit, and then another TWA. I think the health department or the Board of Health is a little more limited from a design perspective than the health department could be in a management perspective.
How does going to the county change that?
Because the county, I believe, would be able to deal with it on more of a special event type basis rather than a peak flow design basis. I may be wrong. They may say the same thing, but I know what some of the regulatory limitations are for the local Board of Health.
Any other questions from the board for Paul Fox?
Yeah, one last question. Doesn't the generator have some siting criteria that has to be met with respect to distances, sound attenuations, physical screening, et cetera, that need to be satisfied as well?
Not that I'm aware of, but we would be willing to comply with it. It's intentionally located behind the building for that purpose, so it is screened. There is some sound attenuation provided by the building. But if there is something that is relative to the township,
We don't have a noise standard on generators?
The noise standard is set by the state. And generally, most of these generators of this size, once you're more than 25 feet away, actually 7 meters is where the typical design is, you hit the decibel level that's permissible at a property line.
And we don't have any physical screening requirements in town either?
That's entirely up to the board. There's no separate standard for generator screening.
We just had a homeowner in Knollcrest install one in the hills.
Mm-hmm.
So that should tell you something.
Right. I have one more question, Carol.
Yeah,
for
go ahead.
Paul, Mr. Fox. Do we have any statistics or data, maximum number of vehicles on the property during peak times, or maximum number of people that have been on the property at peak times? Not projected, but actual. Has anyone ever gone out there and counted how many cars are there or how many people are on the property? Do we have any data on that?
not to my knowledge, no. I think as we discussed earlier, ultimately the peaks that we've seen during the pandemic, it's really difficult to use those as a projection for anything that's going to happen going forward once we return to normal times. I grew up down the road from McElvarney State Park, which is 5 minutes away from here. And I still live there now. And when you look at the parking lots for Hagawani State Park, you can never imagine whose idea was to build so many parking spots. Yet during the pandemic, they had to put a sign out on Route 206 to warn people that the parking lots were full at 10 in the morning. So it was really unusual times, and I don't think it's possible to really project what's going to happen during normal times based on what we've seen over the last years.
Bunch of questions.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else for Paul Fox? Is there another witness? That
Yes.
is-
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Coates is about to be sworn. So, Mr. Coates, please stand next to your attorney and please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? Thank you, Mr. Coates. And please spell your last name and give us an address.
Coates. The address of the business is 3540 Route 206.
Thank you.
Mr. President, please explain the board your position a little more.
I'm the, one of the owners along with my wife. I'm the managing partner and I'm familiar with the data.
And you're in charge of the operations. Correct. Can you just describe briefly for the board? I'm sure most of the board is familiar with the site. Just give a quick overview of the operations. What do you do there?
Well, we make alcoholic cider, and essentially I have two businesses. We have a retail business and a wholesale business. The retail business is selling directly to customers for on-site and off-site consumption. Some businesses selling to different stores, bars, and restaurants.
And since the board had a few questions about COVID, how the pandemic affected, what we start there, and just tell us a little bit about how, when did the site reopen?
The site reopened June 18th of last year.
Okay, so how did the pandemic affect the site? What did you see on site?
Well, it completely blew up our expectations. So we weren't expecting the usage at the tasting room in the outdoor area. He didn't even know what to expect.
And do you attribute that the popularity of the site beyond the quality of the product, anything particular related to the pandemic?
Well, thanks for.
You're reading the record.
You don't have to answer this question.
They crossed my team marking. People didn't have choices a year ago. You couldn't go to bars and restaurants. You couldn't go to the ballpark. You couldn't see a concert. People came. This was a place where people could come and bring their family, bring their friends, bring their pets. So there weren't many other alternatives like that.
And since those restrictions that recently lifted, have you noticed a change in, or guys, as they did phase out, you noticed a change in the volume of customers?
No, yeah, absolutely. Everything, it's slowed down. We're talking about the peak periods in the fall. This year, we haven't had any cars parked on Route 206. And as some of these restrictions have been lifted, there are more people inside now that allow for higher capacity, but for the most part, other than the lower volumes, we're still seeing a lot of people using the facility.
And so at normal times, also sort of off-peak times, the paved parking lot and the gravel parking lot, basically, would you describe as that adequate for the load, the off-peak load?
Yeah, I mean, almost for the hours that I'm there, that I see, the gravel, the improved parking area is absolutely adequate.
Then let's talk a little about kind of the peak times after. Do you feel the overflow parking of the grass covers the, again, after the pandemic's been over? Question, the restrictions are lifted. Do you feel that overflow parking, the grass, is that enough parking to cover those peak times?
Yeah, well, like I said, we have not had or seen at least parking on Route 206 this year. I think that the overflow parking has been adequate to handle peak demand periods. You know, there are also some things that we've done which just to improve the efficiency or the usage of the parking lot, which may sound small, but we had some piles of gravel at the top of the parking lot, which was blocking space for 5 or 6 cars. And if somebody asks how many cars can we get on the property, it's about 100. So we're, you know, without doing anything special, we can now get closer to 110.
And then let's talk a little about some of the larger events you're able to sort of anticipate a big crowd. How do you manage those, and how would you propose to manage those going forward?
Well, there's 2 things. For typical, some of these fundraisers that we've done, where we anticipate higher demand, we've hired parking attendants, so they can make more efficient use of the space that we have. For example, in between our deer fence for the apple trees and the split rail fence that's down at the bottom of the property, you can fit an additional 10 cars, actually a little bit more, which we do when parking people really know about that. So it's, and you can get the cars more efficiently without excess spacing between the cars. That's what we've done for
In your experience, is this a typical setup for a farm, parking on a farm?
Sure. Yeah, I saw last weekend, Olmsted's Farm had parking attendants and cars parking on the grass.
If you could just clarify the PLC's position with respect to parking on 206.
Yeah, we're on the same page. We don't like it. It makes us nervous. We see the hazard of it, and more to talk about, but we're trying to do something about it, especially with this plan.
Now, Paul described the specifications of the proposed improvements. Could you just walk us through how you intend to use them and how those will help benefit the site, make it more efficient?
Yeah, and just as backdrop, a year ago, we didn't know how people were going to use the facility. As it turns out, people tend to use this more for the outdoor space. So we found that we've had to basically upgrade the space that we have by enlarging the gravel patio area. We can get more people onto the space, get them off the grass, and then onto a specified area. By putting a pergola, creating shade, it's not just for light, but it's for shade, which ends up being very important during these current times when it's very hot. Same thing with the covered shelter. I see the covered shelter, as a way to formalize having music, make it convenient for bands. But when we don't have music, then just have more shaded area for customers. And again, it's all grass.
And you talked about the outdoor service, how important that.
So that's top of the list. And it may not be obvious. But by putting this in, this is going to streamline our operation. One of the biggest concerns for us has been the wait times for customers to get a drink. We have a bottleneck, which is just tap capacity. We can hire more people, but if we don't have the taps, then we can only pour so many drinks. This is where our bottleneck has been. And we've had wait times up to an hour to get, that was back in the fall, just to get a drink. Some of these people are coming in just by cans. I would wait myself in line for an hour, but people were. And so by putting this dispenser outside, what it does is it decreases our wait times and processes the customer transactions.
How do you anticipate that has a parking? Can you just talk us through that?
Yeah, so whether or not a customer is coming in to buy cans or not, take the example of the person that's coming in for cans. If instead of waiting in line for 15 to 20 minutes, they don't have to wait in line at all, then that's one car that is not going to be there for 15 to 20 minutes. And the same thing, for people coming to consumer beverage on site, it's the shorter wait time, then the quicker they get to get the drink the drink.
So is it your testimony that by reducing wait time, you'll be able to more efficiently use the parking lot?
I think so. By reducing wait times to get a drink, you're reducing the times that cars are going to be in the parking lot.
Let's talk a little bit about the grass, the road, and that's been something that some board members have raised. Talk us a little bit through kind of how you see the additional patio space impacting your ability to establish that grass.
Well, it's the idea is by getting. You're right that we didn't have a chance to get the grass get established. By getting people off the grass on average, onto the patio or onto the covered shelter, and I think it decreases the chances of grass take place. I also like if Paul mentioned Portland Mall, Paul Ferrero mentioned Portland Mall spots, and we can absolutely do that. Or just reserve an area that cordon off from walking traffic and let the grass grow. You haven't tried that.
And lastly, I just want to talk about the music and covered shelter. You would be obviously willing to comply with any noise restrictions or to cite that in a way to minimize any noise effects?
Yes, absolutely. And we became aware that during some of the events where we did have some live music performances recently, that there were residents in the area that complained about the noise levels. We don't want to do that. We don't want it. So we tried to make adjustments with the type of band, yes, play. And I also think, and specifically drums. I also think that by reorienting the direction of the music of the speakers towards the tree line, away from Highway 206, that would also over 206.
We talked a lot about the kind of peak time. Could you also explain to the board, again, it's not been open that long, but talk to us about what does winter look like? What is off-peak time? How busy are you on a random winter day in midweek?
Well, yeah, the average in the winter, there was a day where we didn't have any customers. So there was a day where we sold 1 4-pack, and I did it this month. It slows down, and it most of the days we just don't have an issue with parking. Sometimes when we do like a fundraiser, then word gets out and we serve popular events. Support institutions at the time of the cider, and so for those periods we.
When you're talking about traffic management, you're really talking about how to manage peak times, not sort of average. Correct. Anything else like that?
Thank you.
John, you seem like a victim of your own success. Question for you. I don't believe, do you believe the intensity will continue? It seems that, now there's more options, that people are going to start going other places. I don't mean to, rain on your parade, but I think the intensity of the cidery will not be as much. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with it because we've already seen that.
Yeah.
People are just not staying as long as they were last year because they were somewhere else to go.
Yeah, so I think a lot of our concerns may not be concerns in another year, unfortunately. Hopefully, they'll just be coming and taking things out. I think someone mentioned, I don't know if it was Frank or Paul, but fire pits. You have fire pits? You're going to be having fire pits?
We have 2 above ground fire.
Okay, and those will be away from any types of structures and things like that.
Sure, we'll invite the fire marshal to consult us on this.
Okay, and are you going to continue to larger events have the porta johns out there, so that would help with the septic situation?
Yeah, we've had them in place since earlier this year. Just so it offloads some of the food factories and then we'll view it as important sense that it's traffic events. Higher traffic we can add, and we're taking it away.
Okay, and you're going to that'll continue, I assume.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have a minimum number that we're going to keep year round.
Okay.
I don't think we meet them, but we just do it as a precaution. To the extent that we start having events, we'll maybe a seasonal increase.
Does any of the other board members have any questions for John?
Yes.
Well, I have one more if I could. And then hours, or the hours going to stay the same? No change in your hours? I know
Yeah.
Frank mentioned that. And
We played around with the hours during a few different times, but right now we're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. Wednesdays through Sundays. 4 to 10, 4 to 9, Wednesdays through Fridays. 12 to 9 on Saturdays and 12 to 6 on Sundays. And I don't see that changing.
okay, so that if there was music, it'd probably be ending at 9.
Correct.
Okay.
I believe, am I wrong that the town ordinance is 10 o'clock?
I think the original approvals were for up until 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're not looking for any change.
All right. Well, thank you.
Carol, I have a question.
Yes, Lou.
Mr. Coates, I'm not sure how to say this as a question, so I'll just ask you if you agree or disagree with me. It seems as if you're going to add some shaded areas, which makes people more comfortable. An outside dispensary, which will have easier access to getting their drinks at a faster rate. Adding music as part of the venue, and then even having special events. Would you agree or not agree that that might actually bring in more customers than you have right now?
Well, I could see how having special events would increase the traffic. That doesn't sound very simple.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of frame that because there was some testimony that there's going to be less traffic, less customers because they have other places to go. But I think if you make things easier and nicer for people, which is a great thing, they might actually have the opposite effect and have more people come in. So I'm going to go back to my original statement was, I think this is a great situation, but we have to have a very good plan for growth.
Yeah, I mean, our base case is not that the traffic is going to increase. I mean, you know, we might be wrong. That's why I have to acknowledge that you might be right. But what we think, based on what we've seen, is that if we process our customer transactions more efficiently, you know, the example of the customer coming in only to buy cans and not having to wait in line for 15 minutes or more, that is going to reduce the demands on the parking space. With live music, it's been not to invite them on the weekends, only to have music events on a Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, which are lower traffic here. We have different types of customers on the weekends. They come from farther away. We're not trying to increase the number of customers. We're trying to improve the ambiance for the customers that we have that are there. That's why we're doing music events really on, weeknights rather than weekend.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. I have a business in town, and I have to tell you, in my parking lot, managing the in and outs, getting people in and out of the building in an appropriate time is a challenge at times. So I appreciate your concerns and your issues there.
Another board member, anyone?
Yeah, I have a question. What
Go ahead,
about,
Nick.
what about the food truck? Is that still going to be there?
Well, we've tried to invite different food trucks, one per day, throughout the year. Yes, I would like to continue to have food trucks.
So that's another sort of incentive for people to stay longer because now they have to eat.
We had the food trucks. We had the food trucks there last year as well. What we're saying is that's not going to be a change from the previous year. So the change that we're making is that by improving our processing time, overall, if nothing else changes, then we're going to see a reduction in customer stay duration.
Hey, John, when you have the food trucks there, where do they park? Where do you usually have them?
Been a mix, either on the group parking area or right in front of the tasting room.
Okay.
Any more questions? Jeff?
What's up? No, go ahead. Yeah.
I've got actually a series of questions that in my mind, haven't been clearly
Go
responded.
ahead, Rich. Go ahead.
Just take, if we can start with Paul's letter. I don't think we talked about the proximate location of these fire pits to the pergola. Has that been established on this plan anywhere? It's on the plan here somewhere?
Can we,
You want to point it out to me, Paul? Because I'm not seeing it.
can we zoom that picture?
Hang on. Is it one of the details on the bottom?
Jeff's going to zoom in as well.
So this one?
Right off the corners.
Yeah, let me zoom down.
They're just portable fire pits. They're nothing.
Okay. Okay,
That's intended. Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about peak times seasonally and during the course of the week, or is it strictly based on these special events? Especially now that things have kind of settled down and sorted out with respect to the elimination of some of the restrictions, et cetera. So, you said before that, the winter is barren, like winters often happen to be. But from, when the weather starts warming up in March, in April, all the way through to October and November is kind of like a seasonal peak. And those more temperate times of year, I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are those more temperate times of the year a little bit more popular than the heat of the summer has begun to show?
So there are a few different, can I give you a longer response?
Sure.
There are a few different ways that I think of peak demand.
Wait, you have to speak up. Please speak up, John.
I said my short height, not John's tall height.
There are a few different ways that I think of peak demand. So during any given week, we tend to have more traffic on the weekends than on nights. I think you're also hitting the nail on the head with respect to the seasonality. The very cold months have been, slow. Very hot days, more recently, I can tell you are slow. And then the more temperate times have been busier. So we recently had our first year anniversary. So we're still learning. this is really the first or second week where we had a year-over-year comparison. And so it is hard to say how this fall is going to be, given how much has changed. You know, are we out of the pandemic period? I don't fully want to answer that.
Mhm.
But last year, our peak period, peak time was in the autumn on Saturdays, even Sundays. So that's a, you know, combined with the busy day of the week and the busy time of the year, then that would be a Saturday in September, October.
So, and outside of, and can I make the assumption that outside of the special events, Saturday and Sundays are those peak days, more temperate times of the year, with or without entertainment?
Yes.
And do you find that demand and volume of business increases when you do have entertainment?
The single greatest factor determinant of the traffic is weather.
Weather.
It's not a food truck, it's not a band.
Well, I can foresee you know, depending on who the band was, right? And how much you're willing to pay them. But, you know, I can see you having a band that's very popular with the kids. And kids might, like, yeah, as you say, you already have customers on the weekends traveling from a great distance. So if it was somebody who was hip and happening and properly marketed on the social media, you might have, you know, a crowd show up on a Saturday, somewhat unexpected. The special events, I think we can plan for, and now I'm kind of segueing into the parking issues. I think we could probably sit with you and come up with some standard for parking limitations on the kind of day in and day out, weekend and weekend out kind of capacities. A special event, if you were sponsoring an event for the American Cancer Society or some, you know, wonderful charity that, you know, they want to invite a couple hundred people to this thing. And the idea is to try to raise some money. Is there a way, and I'm now talking to our professionals, Mr. Collins and Mr. Banish, is there a way for us to set up a situation where we would have a temporary use permit for the sake of the event, which would allow us to increase the capacity of the parking that we might otherwise establish on some kind of temporary basis or just for that event? Is there a way for us to do that?
Frank, I don't have any ideas. One idea that doesn't seem too practical here is, well, the first idea I have is you're dealing with a site plan, so it's not just the special events, it's all events. It seems like there seems to be some area that could be a grass parking area that is doing what Frank Paul and Paul Fox talked about. That's actually somehow demarcated, like I don't know what Allstead's, I think I've seen their grass parking, but basically some way to know, typical of farm arrangements, and this is a farm, and so, and we promote farming in Bedminster, so having temporary event peak grass parking is to be encouraged. It's part of country living. So I shudder, you know, shudder to think of the idea of people parking on 206. So what is sometimes done in situations like this, especially for big events, is
Offsite
shuttle from an offsite parking lot that is acceptable to all parties. I'm not sure we're at that level here, and I don't know of a good place to even encourage the shuttle from. So, and sometimes valet parking is used to crunch parking cars into stacked lanes that the professionals know how to remove without scratching. So that's
Tom. It seems to me that some reasonable limits can be set.
No, not really. Not. You're thinking of limits on people, and that is not something that site plan regulates.
Well, I think one of the suggestions, I apologize if I made it, was that we should probably be striping some of these spaces so that people aren't taking 1.5 spaces. That certainly is something that we would be willing to reach, is some sort of actual, at peak times, striping, cones, railroad ties, something to help to mark those spaces.
I seriously believe that we need to be able to, at some point, either you need to turn them away or the police is going to be there ticketing people who are parked along 206. So some kind of understanding of the limitations of this site to accommodate cars needs to be incorporated here. Frankly, I'm not in favor of it unless there is. But set that aside for a second, because I think reasonable people can come up with a reasonable solution about what that number is. And in 99% of the time, it's not going to be an issue. But at what point, if he's having an event, do we trigger the off-site parking? At what point do we, do the neighbors want to start calling the cops because now they're parking on 206? So in order to prevent that, there's a limitation, and ownership can and should be able to manage that. That's my own feeling now. I'm not asking questions anymore, but let me get back to asking questions. Okay. Frank, if I'm not mistaken, and Tom, maybe you can answer this question as too. When we approved this last time around, we said very specifically, as reflected in Frank's comments, that food would not be prepared or served in connection with the operation. Is that not the case? Was that not the case?
Yeah.
So
They came back for a special.
food trucks, while may not be a big deal to some and maybe more of a big deal to others, was not strictly permitted.
Rich, here, let me address that. And actually, I pulled up the resolution that the board approved back in 2017, and what you just read confirms the testimony that was given at the time. No food preparation of the subject property, food would not be served. Last year in 2020, right after opening, John came to the township committee and requested a special use permit to bring food trucks in, and actually brought the special use permit here. And the township committee authorized John to bring, and here's the description of the activity: 1 food truck to visit property and vend. Vend? Is that what it says? Vend. All right, so someone uses.
Now, as a special use permit, did that have a timing associated with it?
Yeah, it did. So that was basically, it's expiring right around now. And it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Friday, 4 to 10, Saturday, 12 to 9, Sunday, 12 to 6. So, I mean, I was going to come to this eventually, but at some point you might want to true up. And it seems to me that tonight's the night. This application is prime for this, to true up the discrepancies in the original, right? So in 2017, Colin reminded me, I was like, oh, we must have given the approval in 2019. I forgot that it took you that long to get to deal with some of the DOT issues and some of the county issues. But so from 2017, where the concept was tasting room, yeah, people might come in to do a little tasting and buy retail, but the main focus was going to be on selling wholesale and distribution. Obviously, I think Tim said it, victim of your own success, which is great. But to the extent that the 2017 reso doesn't reflect current operations, we've got the special use permit expiring. And then the other special use permit you came in for regarding music. So to the extent that those are uses that need to be addressed moving forward, so rather than coming to the township committee for temporary permits, maybe something you want to put on the table for tonight for a permanent approval by the board. And so I know that it's going a little far afield of what Rich is getting at. And I'm not sure if having the food trucks on a permanent basis, if that does anything to the bathrooms or anything along those lines, that may be an issue for Paul or the county. Anyway, those would be my comments, but when Rich started talking about the food permits, I just want to,
Okay.
food trucks,
So
just want to bring that up.
So again, creating some permanency to that is certainly seems called for. The other question that I had going towards my parking limitations, Mr. Fox, I'm looking at the site plan and it's, there's one dimension here, 482 feet from the corner of the structure to the right of way or the property line. So I'm just using that to kind of approximate the length of the driveway, albeit serpentine. Are we talking about maybe 500 feet of that driveway versus the B line that is 482?
It's probably a reasonable number.
Okay, so if we had 500 feet on both sides of that drive with a 10-foot parking space on each side of that drive, we get to what was described as roughly 100-car limitation.
There's also some additional space though, off to the side of where the orchard is and also downhill from the orchard. There's some additional.
Could you point to that on this? I know the public can't see it, but at least the board, you could describe in words on the site plan on the screen. Where is the orchard area that you're?
So it is, as the plan is.
Why don't you go ahead and go up there?
If you point it on the map, then I can follow along.
Right.
Okay. So the orchard area is through here.
Okay. So it's right
And
up
so
here.
off to the side of the driveway, there's parking available there as well as up along here along the orchard.
So you'd have to eliminate some of the spots that I'm talking about, creating right off the drive to create access to those additional spots.
Just 2 or 3.
Okay. And how many more spots would you put in that particular area? Is that the 10 he was talking about?
I think Mr. Coates could speak to that, but he's actually measured that out.
Was that the additional 10 you were talking about, Mr. Cook?
10 to get to the corner, to go up along the side. Yeah.
So the site has what, 12 spots now? Formal lined paved parking spots?
I think it's 17 plus the loading area.
Well, yeah, or some of those include some of the,
Sure.
employee parking and such, right?
13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
17.
17, including employee parking spots and delivery trucks and such, right?
That's right. One of the things that you did mention, which I thought was a good point, what are your peak times as the season goes on? Now, I've lived in Chester since 1996, or actually since 2000. Before that, I lived in Long Valley. But in Chester, I'm on the planning board, and one of the things we deal with is exactly that fall traffic. And one thing that is proved true year over year, there are 6 weekends in the fall. That's it. It's during September and October. On Columbus Day weekend, you don't have the traffic. On Labor Day weekend, you don't have the traffic. So there's about 6 weekends where we deal with a problem. And that's probably what you're going to see here is there's going to be about 6 weekends where you have a peak usage. And then the rest of the year, you're not going to see that.
To me, I don't see any reason why we couldn't set 100 additional spots besides the ones that we already approved and designated on the plan as a capacity limitation. 99% of the time, it'll never be an issue, as Mr. Fox is underscoring here. But there may be a couple of days a year where you have a special event where some off-site parking may be necessitated. I don't know that you can live with that, Mr. Coates, but that's what I would propose.
So Rich, just clarify, when you talk about capacity, you're talking about parking capacity?
Parking capacity.
Not individual capacity?
Not parking capacity. I mean, if there 200 people show up and, a bunch of car, like we used to go to the drive-in years ago. If there's 4 people per car, it could be 400 people on site, which would be great. But as far as parking and some of the concerns that have been raised, I think Lou made some great points at the outset that need to be addressed. And think now's the time to do it.
Well, since we have Paul on the line, can we ask Paul's opinion?
Absolutely.
Sure. Thanks, Colin, because I've been looking at this map and thinking about it and hearing everybody's discussions, and these are my thoughts. And there's a couple of layers to this, so you'll have to bear with me for a minute. I think one of the issues we have, which is probably something that's got to be dealt with, is what Frank has pointed out and everybody's aware of, where we've got the grass that is not growing so well. As I said before, that can be dealt with by, in my opinion, by creating areas that are rested, allow them to grow in and keep moving up and down the driveway. It's going to take a season or two to get that in shape, but I think that's a way to manage that. But to deal with the site capacity issue, I think Rich has really hit on it. It's not necessarily a capacity issue for people. It's a capacity issue for parking, and how can we manage that? I think first and foremost, any parking on 206 obviously needs to be prohibited. And anytime there's somebody there, there should be a ticket. That's just the way it's got to be. Secondly, I think you can help the parking along the side of the driveway by doing something that I see at a number of farms in the area, where they simply take lime and draw lines on the grass. And you've got to redo it after it rains. You got to redo it now and then, but at least it provides a visual cue for drivers to park, so people don't take up a space and a half or a space and 3/4, and people park well. There are areas along the driveway that are not so conducive to parking because they're simply too steep, and I don't think we want to go through a lot of regrading. I think another option is in the areas that are the grassy field in front of and north of the orchard, that could be valet parking. And that would be up to the owner, the operator, to be able to manage that and get that done. I think if we try to establish parking in terms of where and how, rather than a number, I think we're better off, because I can tell you that there's virtually no chance the zoning officer is going to go out there, count out 100 cars and issue a summons. It just doesn't work that way. I think if we come up with where the cars should be parked, and by exclusion, then there any place else is where they should not be parked, it makes it a lot easier to manage from an enforcement perspective as well.
And we would agree to that as a condition of approval.
That's great, Paul. Thank you.
I agree with that, Paul. I was thinking the same direction, that we should assign parking or establish it somehow and have a parking plan. And that's what you're saying here. And perhaps where the valet parking is, or proposing, we'll call it valet parking, that could be marked some way as well, so that we have a definite parking plan and not just park, in any fashion. Because as you say, they will park wherever they can versus where they should, and keep it more organized. I also think that we should plan for the business to be successful. I mean, it may be that the business is going to lose some business because of the circumstances, but I think with them encouraging a lot of the issues, that the business is going to be successful, and we should plan in that direction. Anyone else on the board have any questions?
Well, I do want to come back to those.
Yes.
To make clear, so the food trucks.
And the music.
The food trucks and the music, not within the original resolution. And, John, you're welcome to come back to the Township Committee again, but I would suggest addressing it here. And to the extent that Paul, if the food truck situation, and there's no kitchen, right? There's no kitchen at the cidery. So the food truck's essentially an amenity for the customers that are coming there. But Paul, whether it's on the bathroom situation, the bathroom count, the flow, or are there other engineering, or Frank, are there other planning issues with having rotating food trucks? Once again, going with one food truck per day. Does that raise any other concerns from our professionals?
Paul?
I think if you deal with the parking with where you can and where you can't, it becomes self-regulating.
So you don't see, so Paul, I guess that specific issue is, you don't see anything particular about the food trucks and providing food or having food available at the property. You don't see that as an engineering issue?
I don't think it makes the issue any worse.
Okay.
I've been there when it's been jammed up like this with no food truck. So it's not the food truck that tips the scale one way or another.
I do think, Larry, that the question about how many events, music events there will be, the special use permit last year, I think, gave them 9 of those. And I don't know whether they are asking that music be a routinely permitted thing, or if it's also going to be rationed out over, the course of the year.
Well, Frank, that was something that John came up with when he presented to the Township Committee. That was really from April through end of May. So those 9 events were over essentially a 1-month period.
Okay. I looked at it fast. Thank you, Larry.
Push it out the year. And I don't want to answer for John. I mean, that's a question to you. To make it on a permanent basis?
Yeah, I think John should answer that, about the music.
About the music or the food truck? The music I would like on a permanent basis. I don't want to be limited to 9 events per year. Food trucks would like to have the same exact permission that was given to me from the town.
I guess we would propose that if the board were to grant that relief, that we would mirror language from special use permits for the food trucks and mirror the language from the special use permits to extend that number out over the calendar year.
And so there were, and Mr. Coates, John, mentioned this, that there were complaints from the noise, and interestingly enough, it wasn't the immediate residents. It was from up the hill, across and behind Church of the Hills. So just based upon the elevation, I just imagine that the sound actually carried over 206 and was hitting some of the residents on, was that Lisk Hill and Union Grove? Yeah. So is there a way, it seems that you've mitigated it. Do you think that this location also mitigates, where you've identified the that sort of, I think whatever term it's used
Covered
here,
shelter?
Proposed covered shelter?
We may have to adjust the location of the covered shelter, or at least reorient the covered shelter so that it's pointing towards the woods.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Towards the woods,
Away.
back towards P-PAC or towards Chester?
Towards P-PAC, towards the backwood line.
And away from 206.
Easterly.
Yeah.
Larry, if I could, Madam Chair, Mayor, I think one of the things that's challenging here is everybody would probably like to see us move this from the temporary use permit category to what the board has actually approved. And I'm a little concerned about that only because as long as it has to come back to you, if we find out there's anything that's not working, you don't issue the next temporary use permit. If we grant approvals now that make it part of this use that's authorized by the board, it's an entirely different situation if things go awry, and doesn't sound very efficient. And happy to listen to anybody who thinks that's the wrong way to do it, but it gives you some keys to the kingdom we won't have once we say it's part of the use.
Very good point. Carol?
Yes, Lou.
This is Lou again. Can we get into the comments section? I don't have any questions for Mr. Coates.
I had one question I wanted
Okay.
to ask John before we pass on the music. The complaint you had, was it because of the time of day that it happened?
I did not receive the complaint directly. It may have been just the fact that they were hearing music. The music was always stopping before 9 o'clock.
I think that's right. Since I'm the one who actually received at least one of the
Yes.
complaints, I know one of the other complaints went to the police. It was, just as John said, it was hearing music. It was not after 9 o'clock, but it was on a sort of a routine basis. I guess there was like 2 events, and certainly the person who called thought this, was upset if that was going to be a routine basis, but also it may have been, just as John said, with amplification and drums, which carries a lot more than other music.
Okay. Does any of the other board members have any questions about the music or the traffic?
We have to go back to this because you said you want to reorient something. So Paul, maybe you need to show us on the map how you want to reorient the covered structure or whatever it is that will be the, like, let's call it the band location.
Doesn't look very
So at the present location, it's essentially having musicians facing Route 206. And one option for addressing some of the concerns from the other side of the highway would be to just move it down here, respecting the setback line, and have the musicians facing essentially the patio area. And uphill, you have, this is gently rising topography and a very mature woodland back there, which I think is probably a pretty good
Natural amphitheater.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that just made it closer to 206. So are you also saying you'll put some sort of solid noise absorbing attenuating wall behind the band?
This way?
No,
Because if you move something closer to the noise, to the person who's complaining, you actually
Make a good point. Though. It
automatically
needs to
make
be directional, doesn't it?
It is directional and it doesn't stop by trees. So I'm just just an idea for you to consider that if you're building a structure and you build a structure with a solid wall, it will actually stop noise from going towards 206, but you didn't propose that. So I think you better think about that.
Well, the idea was if we put it down here, again, the idea is customers that are here at the patio and perhaps at some of, in the lawn area here, the musicians and the speakers would be pointed away from the highway.
I understand, but they are still audible at the back of a.
They set up any kind of stage or anything at all, or is it just out there in the yard with the speakers?
We set the bands up on a trailer.
Okay.
This is before we got the complaints, before we made adjustments. We also had bands that were acoustic and unplugged. They were amplified, but they didn't have drums. It's just a different experience and they're work complaints. So I think the combination of type of band and the orientation with respect to Mr. comments, the speakers are pointing. We weren't getting the complaints after we made the adjustments. I think even these further adjustments will go even further to next level.
So you've had concerts there. Are people bands playing at nights and received no complaints? What you're saying?
Most of the events that we had, we only did it 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, and I'll say that I did get an email from the individual who contacted me the first time. And because I had spoke to Mr. Coates and he made adjustments, and I followed up with the resident and asked him, have you noticed anything different? He said, yes, I don't hear it anymore. So I would say that's as good a proof as you can get, that whatever adjustments you made worked.
I know we don't like to see people complaining.
Right.
But that's pretty low standard. You know, it's like anybody can complain about anything at any time. It's like anybody can sue anybody at any time, right?
They do.
They do.
I know they do.
They do.
So, but
And if he's shutting it down and the condo residents here,
if he's shutting it down at 9 o'clock, then that's all he's obliged to do, no?
No. Fairly don't ever.
If he shuts it down at 9 o'clock, that's all he's obliged to do. I could have, 20 kids in my backyard playing basketball that might make just as much noise.
Mhm.
And what would be the neighbor's, right to complain about that?
I mean, it sounds to me like you
They
have, and
complain.
you've addressed that, so.
You've made the adjustments.
Right.
Yeah, no, I just want to, on that issue, I do want to commend
Right.
John, because reached out to him,
Yeah.
he made adjustments. I followed up with the person who did complain, and their issues were resolved.
My only concern is if you redirect or reorient the band now to be playing towards up the hill, are you gonna hear complaints, we're gonna get complaints from people at Gladstone? Because there's housing back there.
We don't want to annoy anybody regardless of where they reside. So, behavior, right? I react to these. When I'm, aware of these issues, I try to do something.
My only concern is you're constructing something that's permanent, right? So the orientation is gonna matter, right? And how easy is that to then change if in fact we get additional complaints in the future?
Oh, I see what you mean. Again, probably since we only have, we expect to have bands playing, most once a week. We have bands on maybe more than once a week, but most of the time, most of the hours, that structure is going to be used by customers. And to the extent, now that's, again, the topography, it's pointing uphill, and residents are a couple hundred feet below, half a mile away, much further away than, I'm not sure of that, but there's a pretty thick buffer of trees. I'd be surprised if we get through that. But if there is, then I'm perfect. I live here. I want to be this, been on the record stating that I view this place as a gathering spot for the local community. I don't want to erode the goodwill that's been.
And you've always demonstrated that, John. I guess the question is, and this goes back to Frank's point of, once it's approved and baked in here, it's hard to unwind, and I'm still concerned that we don't know enough about, particularly sound and how it travels and where it's going and what kind of complaints we're gonna get. I'm just tapping the brakes on that a little.
Well, and to some extent, that's right, that's municipal law, right? You've got a noise ordinance ready, and exceeding that noise, there are remedies for that, but the town isn't without waiting to range on if you felt like you really needed it. So I think we'd be willing to make adjustments if for some reason we were found to be in violation of the noise, or just creating a nuisance for neighbors. We'd be, of course, willing to adjust I really think this is a question about the direction the speakers are pointed. John will do the right thing in terms of making sure that the appropriate adjustments are made for exceeding any decibel limits.
Well, I think there are two comments in your statement. One is the decibel limits, in which, that's on, there's a decibel threshold and a time threshold, right? So two different issues, as opposed to the nuisance issue, which is, hey, if you live in, let's just take it away from the Bedminster resident or even the Chester resident, who's Pete back Gladstone, it's like, wait a second, now I'm hearing music, Saturdays from 6 to 9 o'clock or 6 to 8:30. That's where did this come from?
Right.
If it's on a continual basis, I could certainly see some residents having concerns with that. Just it's to Rich's point, it may not violate a decibel threshold or a time threshold, but it's just going to be there, and that's something that you may have to just deal with or ignore. if it's not enforceable by Bedminster.
Frank, you're muted. Frank, I think, yeah.
Thank you, Carol. I appreciate that. You know, it might work best for everybody if we agree that the food trucks are not a big problem, to build them into this approval by the board, but for the governing body to still hold the bigger hammer on the music so that anytime things are going wrong, you don't have to keep issuing a temporary permit.
We can't really hear you all that well. Can you repeat?
Saying maybe the temporary use permit just for the music would be the right approach, and maybe we all think that the food trucks are fine and they don't need to be on a temporary use track. We could approve those with the kind of timing the governing body did previously, but I still think we're going to end up with some kind of music issue where the governing body would much rather have control over the situation than to find out the zoning officer, for whatever reason, is limited in being able to respond.
Well, you know, I mean, the music's going to be when the zoning officer is not working. And
Are we ready for comment yet? Are we finished with?
I think we are, Lou. Go ahead.
Okay, so just bear with me for a few minutes. I have a couple points that I want to make here. The first is I 100% support John's ability and rights to improve his property, to increase and you know, make his facilities better for his customers. So I have no problems whatsoever in terms of that proposal. My biggest concern is an accident on 206. I've seen, I live in Pottersville. I go up and down to Chester, you know, sometimes 2 or 3 times on a weekend. I've seen some couple close calls. It's really problematic. Whether or not this is a farm stand or you know, an event venue, I'm not sure exactly what it is. And all other sites and facilities across the township have limits. Back to Rich's point, we don't have a limit on cars parking. We don't have a plan for cars parking. We don't have a plan for special events. So I think that we're not really 100% finished here, and there's a lot to discuss. And I would like to see the applicant come back with a more specific parking plan or event plan, whether it be temporary, whether it be permanent, whether it be you know, off-site, whatever. I just think that we're not ready to you know, to finish up with this application. That's my perspective.
I have to tend to agree with you, Lou. I think we do need some kind of a parking plan. We have some good ideas, and I think some of the things Paul have suggested would be good ideas. And so I think that that's what we need to do, unless someone feels differently. Any board?
I was all for a number, frankly. This is Rich. I was all for a number, frankly, but I'm totally comfortable with Paul had suggested in just creating these designated, you know, these designated areas someplace. So, but whether we need I need to see a plan and become comfortable with that plan, or whether we can leave that to our professionals, you know, like Paul, to decide what's appropriate. I'm willing to let Paul make that judgment, but you know, again, I'm not opposed to evaluating a plan that may be proposed, but I think Paul came up with an excellent solution to the concerns that Lou raised initially, and that, you know, maybe I was trying to enumerate, but maybe enumerating it isn't necessary. I'm inclined to agree with Paul's approach. So I think we could throw it over the wall and let Paul solve it, myself, but we all want to see a plan by all means.
I just don't know what that's going to get us. I mean, we know the site, we know where they're going to park. It's self-regulating. If they can't park on 206, they're going to go somewhere else. Any other facility we have in Bedminster, if you go into the parking lot, there's no parking, you leave. I mean, if they start to park on 206, which we don't want them to do, obviously, I think we have a mechanism in place where they get a ticket. So I think if the applicant, you know, posts no parking, you're going to get a ticket, they're not going to park there. I mean, if we ask them to come back with a plan, I mean, we know how much parking is available. We already know that. I mean, what?
We know how much parking is available, but we don't know where and how. And Tim, I have to disagree with you. I've been there several times. People just do whatever they want to do. They park with their nose sticking out on 206. Sure, they'll get a ticket after the fact. What good is that? Because they're going to do whatever they want to do anyway.
But if he has a parking plan, I mean, how's that going to prevent him from still doing what they want?
Well, at least if you have parking attendants, if it's more organized, if it's more methodical, it makes things happen maybe in a better way.
If I could just weigh in for 1 second, that was really the gist of my comment number 5, was for the applicant to come up with a traffic control plan to deal with this. And that would be the parking layout, based on some of the comments tonight, how to deal with peak flows, whether or not they will use valets to certain parts of the site, but all that can be incorporated not only on the site plan, but a traffic control plan.
Well, do you feel comfortable with us approving it and you be in charge of that? Or would you prefer the board to actually review it?
I don't have a problem with looking at it. I think I know what the board is talking about it, but it's obviously the board's discretion as to whether or not they want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll weigh in here. I mean,
Yeah, George?
I think I think what Paul has expressed, his ideas, certainly it seems like it's not an option. 206 is not an option. We know that. So I think Paul can work behind the scenes with the applicant. For me, that's the best way to move ahead for me.
And to be clear, that would be a plan that's included with these site plans. So it's part of the approval and incorporated into the approval by the board.
Correct.
Can we see that before we make a resolution, but not have to necessarily bring them back here, Tom? Can that plan be made
Not
part
without
of the
bringing them
resolution?
back here. You can say you're approving it to be.
Subject to a plan that Paul works out?
There is a way to do that, but that does involve them coming back here.
But yeah, if it involves them presenting a plan to us, that's a public hearing.
Yeah,
But if they're representing both
basically, if the board
plans,
is,
it would be
if the board
attached to our
is,
Yeah, then it would be subject to.
right, if the board is going to continue to look at it and have a meeting like this, where you're in a hearing talking about the applicant's application, then it basically has to either be continuation of the public hearing or the retention of jurisdiction by the board over that specific condition to be approved by the board, not by Paul. Sounds like I don't know what the majority is.
Could I just?
So what are our options?
Can I make-
So what are our options?
Somebody has.
I think what
Right.
Paul had said to us, thanks, Carol. I think what Paul has suggested is that the best way for parking on the grass is going to be to do what we do with soccer fields and have resting periods for parts of the site over the next 2 years that allow the grass to grow sufficiently so that we don't end up with what we have now. So I think we need a parking plan that says, as we work through that change over time, where we have to move the cars from one place to another, this is what we're doing for the first year or two. And when we're all done, this is where the cars should park. And I think Rich's number of 100 cars wasn't far off from the kind of number you'd probably want to accommodate in the long run. The trick is, like Paul said, if we just stripe them out right now, we'll never grow grass. They'll just keep parking. So, I think it's a little more complicated, but I trust Paul to figure out how to do it. I think he could report back to the board on what he thinks.
I agree.
I agree as well. I do think that if we can get some signs on 206, no parking signs, I think that would be helpful. Make it clear that customers are not to be parked there. Would that be acceptable too?
Absolutely. And I believe there are some signs that we could certainly strengthen the language, do other things to
Make them more visible, yeah.
Okay.
During an event, post more signs.
Yeah.
Sure.
I know in the past, there have been temporary signs put up along 206 as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really a combination of.
That can be part of the plan, Paul, I guess, the temporary signs. Yeah.
Or part of the
Good.
traffic control plan.
Good.
So I just have a question about, because it sounded like Lou wanted a plan coming back, but then Lou, you just agreed with Paul saying that Paul could review and felt comfortable reviewing a plan to be presented by Mr. Fox.
That's a good point, Larry, Mr. Mayor. I would say that if we could just make it contingent upon further working with our town engineer to make sure our parking control plan is in place. Something to that nature.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
All in favor?
I would
Okay,
think the parking control plan should also include a no more parking sign at the entrance. Tells people not to even come in the driveway and to keep going. Seems like a reasonable
I mean,
thing.
when it's full,
Well, I think they'll do that when they go looking for a parking space.
No objection to putting a lot full sign.
Yeah, but I mean, just, you can agree to it. I'm just, in practice, I just don't see it.
No, I think what, I'm not sure, maybe we could hear from the board member who was talking, Nick, I guess. I think what he's talking about is for the beginning few yards or feet of the driveway, a no parking sign along that section. Is that what you're getting at, Nick?
No, what I'm thinking of is sometimes when you're trying to find a parking spot in Manhattan, when you come to a parking garage, they'll have a sign that says no more parking.
it's full, yeah.
I see,
It's just, I'm sorry, I don't see that as practical.
No, I don't either because of the rural nature of the driveway, but
So if there was an
Guys going up
attendant,
and down that quarter-mile driveway.
yeah.
the attendant would know it was full.
And just a thought, you may have an Uber driver that needs to go pick somebody up, right?
Well, that may be different.
I don't know.
You can get an Uber out there, wow. Okay, so Sounds
Okay,
like-
so can we just check to see if there's anyone in the public? I think there was not, but let's just check. Janine?
There is not.
Okay, so we'll close it to the public. And Tom, you want to proceed?
yeah, I do want to get direction though on the concept of that Frank had about, are you all okay with one food truck as a permanent food service at the property? That will mean you're modifying a prior condition of a prior resolution which said no food service based upon the then plan of the applicant that they didn't expect any, which is fine, that they're asked that they could be allowed by you to do that. That's not a big deal, but is one food truck what we're allowing by site plan approval, which is permanent? And if that is so, are there any restrictions on the days of that? I don't care, but you might. And then do you want to separate that from music and let that be viewed, special events
Yeah.
that are reviewed by the township committee by special event permit, as Frank seemed to be suggesting? Is that?
yes.
Well, it wouldn't be a bad idea to show where those food trucks are on the parking plan.
So where the food truck will be, I think I don't know that I'm hearing that there have ever been more than one food truck at the same time. If that's so, and that's what you want, Mr. Coates, please tell us now. I am concerned that that is not.
Not more than one, just.
One at a
the
time.
same- Stick with what we have.
Right, so, and just to
The food truck will be approved.
allow one food truck to visit property and vend food on a regular basis, location TBD. Thursday, Friday, 4 to 10, Saturday, 12 to 9, Sunday, 12 to 6.
Actually, can we add Wednesday? At the time I went through, in front of me, we were not open on Wednesdays. We're now open.
And your original resolution, I believe, is Monday to Saturday, and then Saturday, what was it,
Close
10
Monday and Tuesday.
and then Sunday till 10. So the
Sunday.
original resolution allowed, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Sunday till 6.
Sunday till 6. So we were just conforming. Well, at that point, do you just want to make,
Opening hours.
yeah, do it during open hours? Then no reason to.
Well, but I'm not sure we regulate his open hours. He might regulate them, but.
Well, it was part of the resolution, so he.
Of the planning board, that one?
No, he gave testimony.
Well, but.
So if he's changing the testimony or he wants the food trucks to coincide with the hours that he gave testimony in 2017, we could do that.
Well, you can change anything. I'm just trying to, I'd like to put them in here.
Right.
I take it would be food truck from on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 to 10, and Saturday, what time? 12 to 9, and Sunday, what time?
12 to 6.
12 to 6.
Do we want to add on holidays, it's the same as Sunday, or, like the 4th of July,
No, because the 4th of July.
different hours than a normal Monday?
I don't think he's gonna have a food. truck
Holiday
on
should be
Monday,
a normal
is that true?
Saturday, no?
But John, maybe come up. I don't know. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just I want to put it in the words in the resolution. So like
So
what Nick is asking, do you want some option to have Sunday hours on holidays, closed holiday, when the public is,
On Monday,
yeah, do you want the ability to have a food truck on holidays? And if so-
Memorial Day. So Memorial Day is Monday.
Yeah, so that would be the same as Sundays, 12 to 6. Holidays could be same. Okay.
I mean, it might just suggest, it might be more like Saturday.
Yeah.
It's a holiday. But I always get one day. Right. Close enough, that's what it suggests.
So you'd like
Yeah,
it, so Dave is highlighting that you'd request it to be Sundays would be the same as Saturdays, 12 to 9.
Holidays.
Yeah, you don't have to do it. Holiday, I'm sorry. All right, so
Sundays are still Sunday.
now I don't know about this. I don't understand this to be determined. Don't we know where the food truck's gonna go?
Well, I'm just reading to you the special use permit.
So shouldn't it always be in this one spot, and shouldn't it be a non-parking space?
Right.
Because I don't want to hear about this, we don't have enough parking, and then at the same time say you can take up 3 parking spaces with a food truck. So,
It won't take away from any space.
well, but why don't we show it on the plan? I mean,
I think it should be part of the parking plan where the truck is.
To approve, or maybe, I don't know, do you want to put it by the dumpster?
Call to approve.
You can't go to a dumpster when you go,
When
when you have a food truck there, you shouldn't be going to the dumpster, so what do you want to do, Paul?
Well, since the food truck would be there when you're really not having deliveries come and go, we could really just use that loading area.
Could you show that on the drawing here?
In front of the dumpster?
Is that where you want it? Because
You want to put
it's
a
not where,
food truck
it's
next
not
to
where you
the
put it
dumpster.
now.
Yeah.
Well, really, you could just park it right here.
In front of it, like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Where's that?
Like going lengthwise, like
Is that where you
across
want
where
it,
the
John?
dumpster driveway is.
John, where do you like to put the food
Yeah,
truck?
let me zoom in.
So we can pick right.
And don't say on top of the septic system, please. Just don't say that.
Not on top of the septic system, there's an area right off of here.
Right.
That's
John's
in front of
pointing here.
On grass,
And then, yes, on grass. And then, what Paul was saying is that, there are days, most of the days are slow, so parking isn't an issue, and we've had several food trucks in the loading area. So you put it
Yeah.
here.
but even there, you're not technically in a parking space. You're not blocking a parking. So, Paul, any ideas on do you want to have this to be shown on the parking diagram where the food trucks might park? Food truck might park.
Truck, singular, yeah.
Truck. Paul?
I think it could be on the traffic control plan. It could be right in front of the large access doors to the building.
Yeah,
That's where it should be.
he said 3, he mentioned 3 alternatives, the grassy area to the left of the parking spaces, that space you just mentioned, and in front of the loading space, where in front of the area where the garbage dumpster is. I know you couldn't see that, but that's what he said.
Yeah, they could all be alternates. All of them will work, I think.
Okay,
You'll find out pretty quickly which one works best.
okay. Thanks. So we're staying with the music is special use permit, right?
Thank you, Frank.
I think it's good for everybody. I think it is good for Mr. Coates too. I think that gives you some flexibility as well. And really,
It's not a special event thing. It's
special use permit so many times a year that.
And it's not just COVID, it's really a way for the governing body to let somebody have some special activities, so. Okay, so hold on one second, I'll try to look at my notes. Anything else, David, that, or John or Paul, that you'd like to present tonight? Okay.
Tom, making it subject to some kind of either county board of health or our board of health or somebody's board of health.
What
I'll go check it out.
What Paul has in his memo
Yeah.
is, and it makes sense, health department approval. And I know that sounds difficult, but like things like porta potties and how many there are and how frequently they're pumped. That's not really like a board of health determination, but it is something the health department checks, and supposedly, according, if you remember them, there's a check mark that somebody inspected them. So basically, it would be an ongoing health issue that could result in directives from the health department to cure something. Like, I imagine nothing bad would happen, but really keep it clean. And sometimes they even say, really like what he's doing, you have to add 10 more because you're going to have an event, and they could tell him that. So.
Do the porta potties become not so porta?
There are ways.
Do they have to become permanent, frankly? And you just have to get a pump
not
regular?
exactly, no. That's why the health department is involved, because it is not even, remember, this is not going to be an enlargement of the septic system at all. And I don't, but so.
Yeah, they have to sanitize them.
And Mr. Johnson, the board was to seek that grant the approval, we would ask for the ability to begin construction of the pergola pending the final resolution.
Okay. Yes, everything would be effective, but you do have to coordinate with Paul, okay?
Of course.
And the health department. So if the board entertain it, it's a motion to approve the amended preliminary and final site plan and variance for coverage as requested here tonight, with the conditions discussed tonight, subject to the standard conditions and to Paul and Frank's reports. The applicant is authorized to permanently have one food truck for food service, but no food service from the building. And to do that, one food truck at locations determined by Paul Ferrer, the township engineer, and shown on the parking plan. And on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 4 to 10, Saturday 12 to 9, Saturdays and holidays 12 to 9, and Sunday from 12 to 6. With respect to music, the condition will be that the music is something which will be within the jurisdiction of the township committee by special use permit, and the committee will have determined the standards and requirements with respect to music. But with respect to the location of the music, it shall be directed as much as possible away from Route 206 and towards the rear of the property, towards this hill area and tree area on the rear of the property. This is also subject to this explicit condition that the applicant will work with Paul as item 5 of his report and comply with the township engineer's directives with respect to the formal parking and traffic management plan, and shall, among other things, as required by Paul, shall also be required to post signs of no parking along 206 and establish the grass, better establish the grass areas as described by Paul and Frank in their comments. Is there such a motion?
Just to clarify, in that, is it, we're also specifying that the outdoor space will also be outdoor serving space. So you're actually going to have fully plumbed taps heading out there? So you're going to have taps. So no, for the taps, for the dispensing that you're doing, the sales you're doing outside.
Yeah.
That's by tap, or those are the cans?
By tap, they're
Keg.
the keg that's inside of the refrigerator.
But there's no, I think John stressed, there's no plumbing infrastructure that goes to it.
It's a kegerator.
Oh, so it's a kegerator?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought this was something on a more permanent basis for the outside dispensing.
No, I mean, I'd like to have it out there. Weather nice, but it's something that is,
So a kegerator, don't, so I mean,
On which-
we know what a kegerator is.
It was 40 years ago.
Yeah, right. Okay, I forgot. Do we need to put that in there that there'll be sales and dispensing outside?
That's fine,
You
yeah.
don't have to repeat that resolution again.
No, and they described that in their hearing, that's what they're doing. So
Okay.
and it's part of the drawings that they're going to do that, but I'll make sure it's in the resolution. So anything further from board members to add? So with that, we need a motion to approve the proposed resolution. Will be effective tonight to be memorialized at a later date, but the applicant is still required to comply with all the requirements of this resolution, Mr. Ferrero and the Health Department. Such a motion?
I'll make a motion, Tim Walter.
Second.
And a roll call, Janine, please.
Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Committeeman Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Straka?
Aye.
Mr. Travellini?
Aye.
Mr. Rodelius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. DiGiovanni?
Aye.
Mr. Walter?
Aye.
Chairwoman Gutschall?
Aye. Okay,
Thank-
congratulations, John.
Good luck.
thank you.
Good luck to you.
Good luck,
John.
Thank you.
Happy for it.
I'll open it up to the board. Does anyone have any comments or things they'd like to talk about?
Just a reminder that for July 8th, the planning consultants who are working on the AT&T study will be returning to the board with addressing some of the comments and questions that were raised at the June 10th land use board meeting.
Okay. Do we have anything else on the agenda for next Thursday?
Oh, I have a comment
Yes, Nick.
before we move on.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to announce that my wife and I are planning to move to Middletown, New Jersey by the end of August. So accordingly, I have to resign from this committee. Just wanted to mention it was a great experience for me, opened up a whole new world of activity I never knew existed. I had to learn about underground water seepage when they were talking about installing a solar panel farm a few years ago. You know, how do we deal with the impact of the elite property onto Lamington Road? How will you decide on the impact of Bedminster 1 on Pluckerman? And sort of major things like that. So it was really been interesting to learn about all that. And I want to thank all the board members for making that learning experience fun as well as informative.
Did you say Middletown, Nick?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that like the mothership? You're going back home?
No, well, it's more my wife's mothership. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I can live anywhere in New Jersey.
Fair enough.
Well, Nick, we want to thank you. We
I'm
want to
sure I'll
thank
have
you.
to drop in on their land use board.
Yes, you're
Nick, I almost wish I was born and raised in Brooklyn because everybody who's worthwhile seems like he's from Brooklyn.
And you can live anywhere.
That's true. But Nick, we want to thank you for your service. I mean, you've been on for many, many years now, and you know, it's been quite a while.
Yeah, how long, Nick?
Oh, I haven't really stopped to count that up, but it must be, I don't know, 8, 9 years. Maybe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you were on the planning board while I was on the zoning board, so.
That's right.
You've been on quite a while, and I came on in 2005, so
Oh,
I think
okay.
you were close to it, I think, Nick.
Yeah, okay, well then that's 15, 16 years, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so yes, thank you again, Nick, for all you, and we wish you the very best. And
Thank you so much.
I'm sure you'll find things to do.
Congratulations, Nick.
Okay.
And congratulations, Nick.
Okay.
Okay, so back to my question. Do we have anything else on the agenda for next week? Just
No, we
AT&T?
No, we do not.
Okay, so it's the AT&T. Okay, any other questions? I think we have no other applications at this time that we've scheduled. Is that right, Paul? I think we're,
There was a conditional use application that I just picked up today from Janine. I haven't even opened the envelope yet.
I know
So
we have
that-
quite a few in the pipeline, but I know that they're not approved or deemed
Yeah,
complete.
nothing is scheduled yet.
Nothing scheduled. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry for the inconvenience in the beginning that I had, but the storm seemed to have passed and we're good. So good night and I'll see you next week.
Good
We need a
night.
motion?
Everybody.
Motion
Motion.
to adjourn.
So moved. Carol, hold a 2-iron in your hand because even God can't hit a 2-iron.
All right.
Okay.
Good
Good night,
night.
Good
everybody.
night.
Good night, everybody. Have a good
Bye,
weekend.
Bye,
Bye
Nick.
now. Bye.
I think he's here till the end.
Who's that, Nick?